My boss was signing contracts with my name as responsible without telling me. I found out when a furious client called my personal cell about an event I never coordinated. What I found when I started looking was worse than I imagined. There are calls that arrive on your personal number from an unknown number, and where when you answer, the tone of the person on the other end tells you in the first 3 seconds that something is very wrong. Not for them, for you, even though you do not yet know exactly why. The call arrived on a Saturday night. A number I did not have saved. A voice that identified itself as Mrs. Patricia Medrano, who told me she was the human resources director of a company that organized their annual gala the previous Friday. Who told me that as the creative director responsible for the project, I owed her an explanation. That the event had been a disaster. That the catering had not arrived on time. That the ambience did not correspond to what the contract specified. That the audio supplier had installed the wrong equipment. That she had a signed contract where I appeared as the direct person responsible for the project. That she wanted to know what I was going to do to remedy the damage. I asked her to tell me the name of the event. She told me. I asked her to tell me the name of the company that had organized it. She told me. It was the company where I work. I told her that at that moment I could not give her an answer, but that I was going to verify the information and that I would call her Monday. I hung up, and I sat with the phone in my hand processing that I had just received a complaint about an event I did not remember having coordinated. My name is Renata. I am 37 years old. I am an events coordinator with 12 years of experience, and I have spent 5 at Productions Rivas, a mid-sized company for corporate and social events whose direct owner and boss is named Ernesto Rivas and is 54 years old. In 5 years, Ernesto had been what one expects from a boss you can work with, demanding but fair, with solid creative judgment, with the ability to land clients I would have found difficult to reach on my own. My role was senior coordinator, not creative director. That title did not exist in my contract. It did not exist in my email signature. It did not exist in any official company document I had produced or signed. But it apparently existed in at least one contract a client had in their hands. Monday, I arrived at the office before Ernesto. I accessed the contract system where we had all project files. I searched for the name of the event Mrs. Medrano had told me. I found the file. I opened the contract. My name was in the project responsible section as Renata Fuentes, creative director, with a signature that was an imitation of mine. I looked for the contract date. It was from 6 weeks ago. I remembered those 6 weeks. I had been working on 3 other simultaneous projects. Ernesto had told me that event was going to be handled directly by him with an external team, that he did not need my participation. That was a small project. It had not been small. It had been a contract of 180,000 pesos. And my name was on it as responsible for something I had never touched. I reviewed the contract system for the last 12 months. I looked specifically for contracts where I appeared as creative director. I found 7 contracts in 12 months where my name appeared in that role. Of those 7, I had worked directly on 4. The other 3 were projects Ernesto had described as handled by him with external support. Projects where I had not participated, but where my name appeared as responsible. I called my attorney that same Monday. Her name was Isabel, and she had spent years in labor and civil law. I described what I had found. She told me what I was describing had several serious implications. First, unauthorized use of my name and signature on contractual documents was potentially constitutive of document falsification. Second, if those contracts had produced problems with clients and the clients were looking for me as responsible, I could be at the center of claims for breach of contracts I had never voluntarily signed. Third, I needed to document everything before confronting Ernesto, because once he knew, he could alter records. She told me the first thing was to make copies of all contracts where my name appeared. The second was to review whether there were any formal client claims against the company involving me. The third was to determine whether the projects where my name appeared without my participation had additional problems beyond what the Saturday call had generated. I spent 3 days doing that work, carefully, without Ernesto knowing what I was doing. What I found was more extensive than Saturday had suggested. Of the 3 contracts where my name appeared without my participation, one had generated a formal client complaint that was in the company's files. One had generated a significant discount to the client for failure to meet specifications that had come out of the company's cash flow without my knowing it existed. And the third was Mrs. Madranos. 3 projects, my name on all of them, problems with all of them, and me without having had any participation in any of them. I also found something I had not looked for, but that appeared while I was reviewing emails between Ernesto and the external teams who had executed those projects, where he described his hiring process. In those emails, Ernesto mentioned that the project was supervised by his creative director. My name. He used it as a quality argument for clients and for suppliers, as a seal that made the projects appear to have a level of supervision they did not have. My name as a guarantee of something that was not being guaranteed. The confrontation with Ernesto I had on Thursday, with Isabel present. Ernesto arrived at that meeting not knowing it was going to be that meeting. When Isabel identified herself and put the contract on the table, his reaction told me that somewhere he had expected this to arrive, but had not expected it to arrive this soon or this way. Isabel presented the file. Ernesto listened. His first position was that it was common practice in the industry, that contracts needed a technical responsible name, and mine was the most recognized at the company, that he always supervised the projects even though he did not appear in the contracts. Isabel pointed out to him that the brand recognition of my name as a commercial argument was not authorization to use it in contracts without my consent, that the projects had had failures that clients were attributing directly to me, that created a reputational and potentially legal risk for me that I had not chosen to assume. Ernesto changed his position. He told me he was sorry, that he had not calculated it could cause me problems, that he believed that by involving my name, he was elevating the perceived quality of the projects. I asked him whether at any point he had thought about asking my permission. He did not respond directly. What Isabel negotiated in the following weeks included several elements. A formal letter from the company acknowledging that the use of my name in those contracts had been without my authorization. The immediate modification of all active contracts where my name appeared in projects I was not participating in. A written protocol establishing that my name could only appear in contracts for projects where I had direct and documented participation. Compensation for the time I had invested in managing the consequences of the failed projects, including Mrs. Madrano's call and the follow-up conversations. Ernesto signed everything. Not, I believe, because he genuinely understood the harm. I believe because the alternative was a legal process that would have been more costly and more public. I ended my employment relationship with Productions Rivas 4 months later. Not immediately or dramatically, but with the clarity of someone who has understood that the problem was not an isolated event of poor judgment. It was evidence of how Ernesto conceived the value of my name in his business, as an available resource, not as something that required my consent to be used. That understanding was not compatible with continuing to build something in that space. What I want you to take from his story has very practical parts for any independent professional or employee whose name has value in their industry. The first, if you work at a company where your name or reputation is part of the commercial argument, establish explicitly and in writing how your name can be used in communications and contracts with clients. Not as distrust, as clarity about something that has value, and that value is yours. The second, periodically review the contracts for projects where your name appears, not only the ones you produce. If there's a contract system at your company and you have legitimate access to it, use it. The contract you do not review because you trust your boss handled it correctly may have your name as responsible for something you are not managing. The third, if you receive a complaint from a client about something you do not recognize as yours, do not dismiss it as an error. Investigate first. The person calling may be looking for the right person according to the contract they have, even though that person is not you in reality. And for whoever is in a leadership position, the recognition another person has built over years of work is not a resource available for your business. It belongs to that person. Using it without their consent is not commercial strategy. It is taking something that does not belong to you. If this story impacted you, comment. Have you ever checked whether your name appears on contracts or documents at your company in roles that do not correspond to you? Like if you believe using an employee's name as a commercial argument without their consent should have clear legal consequences in labor law. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who works at a company where their name has value in the industry and who might need to know this can happen. Practical tip. If you work at a company and your name has commercial value in your industry, propose the inclusion of a clause in your employment contract that explicitly establishes that the use of your name in contracts, advertising, or client communications requires your express authorization. That clause protects both parties because it clarifies what is implicit and eliminates the possibility of it happening through a genuine misunderstanding.